Hey folks, about ready to get started. Just making sure our technology is all aligned. Windows decided to restart as soon as I started. Oh look, Windows has more things to tell me. You need to fix your Microsoft account. Fuck is that? For apps on your other devices, don't have any, to be able to launch apps and continue experiences on this device. Thanks, Windows. That's good news. Alright, let's see if the sound works. Oh, indeed it does. Alright. Cool. Alright, so let's get to answering questions, and if there's any time between questions, I might have to share a little bit of super secret content with you guys, because I'm currently drawing the graphs for our new volume book, which will be called Volume Book. That would be pretty sweet. That's my vote for what it's going to be called, but I'm not the most creative person in the crew, so my opinion doesn't win on that one. I might show you guys that later, but let's start with some questions that you guys already seem to have for me. You want me to reload this, give them a good read, and figure out what's going on. So, let's see here. I got like 5 computers. I feel like Neo in the Matrix, only not as good looking. Oof. Okay. John Hagg says, "Hey Mike, I'm wrapping up a 12-week diet in a few days, and I'm the leanest I've ever been." Congratulations, John. "I've heard you recommend on multiple occasions that you like to get into a mass phase as soon as you can after a gut. The problem is that I've done 3 straight mesocycles of high volume training, so I'm probably in need of a lower volume phase for resensitization purposes. What would be your recommendations for structuring the diet and training to optimize muscle gain and transition to mass?" Well, good news. I actually gave a lecture on this exact topic when I was giving a special lecture for Revive Stronger, Steve Hall and Pascal Floor in London, and I covered this exact topic and kind of laid out a nutritional periodization concordant with training volume that would attend to all of these sort of different demands, and that you're completely right, there is a little bit of an issue there. The good news is that your MRV, your maximum recoverable volume, what it looks like on the end of a cut is going to be lower than it will be if you transition right to massing. On the one hand, okay, we have a problem. We've been doing high volume for a while, and if you've been training at high volumes, like the most volume you're capable of, sort of hypothetically, we can't go up any higher, which is a problem. We can't provide an overload then with volume. And then we have to reset. There's the reason we resensitize. A big deal of that is to be able to have somewhere to go after that. But the good news is that your MRV is actually up from the end of a cut relative to the beginning of a mass. Your MRV goes up because you have way more food to recover with, etc. So what that allows us to do is train in the first mesocycle of your next massing phase of this one coming up with ultra high volumes, the highest probably you've ever done. And you will be able to survive such training. Now, obviously, don't start crazy right away, but start at volumes you're kind of doing now and slowly work up over the several weeks of your next mesocycle. Metabolite training is a good time, a good idea in this case, because it really taxes recovery, but we have everything to spare, and we're growing a lot of muscle, and it's a novel stimulus versus just regular training. So we have all those benefits. After that mesocycle, I would recommend either a small maintenance phase or even kind of a lower volume cutting phase, like a mini cut, or a maintenance and then a mini cut, to get rid of a little bit of the fat accumulation you've got over this first mesocycle of massing and resensitize. So the resensitization should happen, but it can wait for a mesocycle. So I think the first massing mesocycle, it's a really good idea to hit the ground running, train with super crazy volumes, still, of course, with an MRV, but your MRV is going to be the highest it's been in a long time, certainly higher than it was in cutting, and that way you can eat tons of food, get all that good stuff that comes with the rebound, enhanced nutrient sensitivity, etc., and not have to back off right away. I would give that a shot. Seems to work pretty well. It's worked for me numerous times. Seems to be theoretically pretty solid. So give that some thought. Next question. Kyle Lothar says, I'm getting that last name right. What importance do you place on increasing the reps in reserve throughout a mesocycle? I think you mean decreasing reps in reserve. So going from like 4 reps from fail to like 1 rep from fail. He says further, I do really well on 3 and 2 from failure, but I feel like 1 from failure just absolutely wrecks me for not a lot of benefit. I was thinking of setting up most of my hypertrophy mesocycles to do 3, 3, 2, 2 from fail for the 4 weeks. I think that's totally cool. I think there are genetic differences for everything, and I think there are genetic differences, just individual differences, whatever their source is being genetic, environmental, etc., for pretty much every training variable, and they're very small, but they can be meaningful. So I think in your case, if you really notice that training to failure, there's some people just plain old tolerate training to failure better than others. Some people can train to failure all the time and be just fine. I think a lot of it also has to do with the psychology you bring to the table. If failure for you means you're like, I'm done, okay, no worries, cool. You probably sustain it pretty well because the psychological fatigue source isn't super high. If training to failure for you means like heaven and earth, war and peace type of shit, if failure to you means like gun to your head failure, and you're like crying in between sets or something like that, which can't say I haven't done, so then it's going to tax the shit out of you. You won't be able to sustain that sort of effort. For me personally, now remember it's like sort of do as the teacher says, not as the teacher does kind of thing. And I don't really talk about this much on social media because as soon as I put it in print, it's going to get taken fucking completely out of context, as you guys well know. I say it's a good idea to go all the way up to failure or 1 from failure at the end of mesocycles. I almost always leave 1 to 2 reps in the tank. Very rarely do I go to strict failure. I don't remember a time, as a matter of fact, where I've gone to actual failure and missed a rep. Really, really long time. Because I'm like you, I think it wrecks the shit out of me and it's completely unsustainable. So what I would say to you is your 3-3-2-2 looks good, but it can look better. Because remember, there's a deload coming up after that last week, which means I would recommend that you still go 1 to failure at the end. The last week, I think you can still go 1 to fail because you don't have to not be wrecked. And it's good to be wrecked because it's a ton of functional overreaching you're probably getting. It's really good to disturb homeostasis at the end because you have nothing to recover for. You got a whole week to recover. So I would say 3-3-2-1 may be a better bet than 3-3-2-2. Give that some thought. And if you still think you can't even recover even after a deload week because failure training wrecks you that much, just stick to 3-3-2-2. That's much better. But yeah, absolutely. And some individuals, if you're listening to this, some individuals, it could very well be a situation where you go 2-2-1-1 in your weeks and be just fine. So that starting from 4 from fail and going from 1 to fail, remember, it's like almost everything we put out at Art Renaissance and almost everything we do is like scientifically backed training diet. These are theoretical generalities that are places to start. We have no dogma. We don't sell you dogma. We don't say, look, if it's not 4 from fail, that's it. You just clearly haven't been reading the religious texts. You're going to die. We're going to sacrifice you at the RP cult. We're working on the RP cult, by the way. It's another one of our developmental projects. But it's not there yet. So for now, we have to go with science. And science is just general rules. And if you tend to be on one side or the other of the rule, that's totally cool. As long as you're not doing something like starting a mesocycle at 1 from fail and ending it at 4 from fail. That would be dumb. Or just going 3 from fail the entire time. You can probably just keep going then, right? But if you start at the lower end, or so to speak, pretty far or further away from failure, and you trend a little bit closer to failure, you're on the money. And if it doesn't mean you don't get all the way to failure or even 1 from fail, totally cool. That's totally fine. Okay. Got those. Let's get to the next ones. Reload this page. Okay. Tony Drotnell asks, to what extent does training certain muscle groups preserve the retention of other muscle groups? Say that chest is injured and cannot be trained, even with BFR. Will training the rest of the upper body reduce chest atrophy versus no training at all? That's a really good question. No, I don't. I think the best answer is it won't have much of an effect. However, if so, there's two potentialities we have where we are faced with after the body part is no longer hurt, and we have a blank slate to open up on it again, or just a progressive model of first super high reps and nice and easy, or first rehab and then super high reps, nice and easy, and eventually making stuff heavier. But once we can train, we can find ourselves in one of two places that, in one of those places is better than the other. One place we can find ourselves in is the not so great place. It is, let's say we hurt our chest. And I've actually been in this literal exact same scenario. I've been in both, unfortunately. You hurt your chest. Training everything else doesn't mess with it at all. So you're not interfering with recovery. That's important to know. But let's say, granted, that's the case. Okay. And you said, well, my chest is hurt. Fuck everything. I'm not training upper body. I got to really let everything heal up, and then I'll hit it hard again. What task are you set out for at the end of that recovery interval? Well, to regrow your chest, fine. No easy task, but not super difficult because of satellite cells, etc. Task number 2, regrow the rest of your body. So now you have to deal with like a huge load to systemic MRV, right? Total body MRV, you have to literally go from just training your legs for a while to training everything. Tough. Also, you don't make any gains on everything during the rest of that time. Option number 2, you hurt your chest, you stop training it. You train everything else like crazy. A little crazier than normal because chest is gone, your systemic MRV has more space in it, and you can expand the how much training volume you're giving to other body parts just by a little, as long as you don't get out of their individual ranges. So maybe you used to train triceps with like 6 direct sets because you had so much pressing work for the chest. Now you might be able to train them with the 10 or 12 or something like that. So your triceps may even go more than they were before. Because remember, triceps have an interesting relationship with chest training. A part of the kind of training they get from chest training is stimulative, in the sense that if you're doing close grip bench presses or medium grip bench presses, use a shitload of triceps, which is great, and a shitload of chest, which is great. Both kind of are trained above their minimum effective dose, so to speak, whether it's intensity, volume, or both, or some combination of the two. Both are stimulated. But when you're doing like wide grip benching, some variations of dumbbell pressing, the situation with various other forms of presses and some flies with stabilization, etc. The triceps are just activated enough to tire them out, but not sufficiently activated to stimulate anything. So you actually get some junk volume transference, kind of some junk volume infection, if you guys know what I mean by that. So in essence, like a lot of the chest training you do also hits your triceps, which is great, and by hits I mean stimulates. But some of that, some fraction of chest training you do is just going to tire your triceps out. So if you never had to train your chest again, you would be able to hit your triceps with only stimulative volumes or pure rest. Does that make sense? So if you use the opportunity of your chest injury to train your triceps like crazy, train your front delts like crazy, and of course the rest of your upper body. By the way, my roommate, Charlie Jung, is an 800-pound squatter. He's doing hypertrophy phase right now, and he is literally pulling himself up the steps in our house because his legs don't work anymore. Hack squat drop set. Coach Thomas Neal, done him well. Yeah, Charlie has nothing kind to say about his coach at the moment. So in any case, if we train the living shit out of everything, especially front delts and triceps, when we come back to training our chest, we have 2 really big benefits. Benefit number 1 is clearly obvious. Well, we've made gains everywhere else. That's fucking sweet. Can you imagine seeing a guy at the gym like pull his pec and go, fuck, and you're like, oh my God, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine. Shit, I think I pulled something. And the next day, he's in the gym doing some shit, and it's like blue and purple and shit, and you're like, oh my God, fuck. And he's like, I know, I'm going in for surgery tomorrow. Like, it sucks, but I'll be back. And you see him 4 months later, and he's huge traps, huge back, huge biceps, huge triceps, but his pecs are smaller. Are you going to be like, oh man, that injury fucked you up? You're going to be like, what the hell happened to the rest of you? And it's like, wow, I don't train chest anymore. I train everything else. Like crazy. So I made a huge gain. So first of all, huge gains everywhere else. Second of all, a really unique, interesting advantage. Chest is now the only limiting factor in all of your pressing movements. So now, training chest, the ability to overload your chest is so unbelievably easy. Because your triceps and your front delts are so strong, any pressing movement at all is automatically chest work, which is awesome because chest is super easy to train. You don't have to worry about training other body parts. You don't have to worry about beating up your joints because you basically have like an auto-isolating muscle now until it comes back up to the level of the other muscles, and then it starts to kind of sort of demand its own real big focus. So super good news, during that time that chest is still coming up, you can continue to dedicate more time to your other body parts as chest is slowly rising in abilities because it doesn't need a lot to start with. Its minimum effective volume is tiny when you come back, and it goes up slowly. So then eventually, you have to start making room for it again in the general plan. But for a while, you can keep hammering the rest of your body a ton and still see. So you get more or less like double the time to gain. You get time to gain maybe like 1.5. You get time to gain when the chest is hurt for your other body parts, and you get time to gain more or less like half or 2/3 of the way through its recovery until it starts handling more sort of meat and potatoes, weight, and volumes again. Does that make sense? It's a huge advantage there on two sides. One, you get a big step up and actually advance your body parts other than the muscle. But as you come up, you also make it super easy for that muscle to come back because it's just bringing that back versus nothing at all. You know, it's kind of like I'm gonna make like a weird analogy. I'm about to go traveling, so it's kind of the only thing I think of on the spot. Let's say you're like your significant other. Let's say you guys live together. And let's say he or she is coming home from work, and then you have to go travel right after, and you got to leave for the airport right away, super quick. And he or she texts you, and they're like, "Hey, I'm going to be like 30 minutes late, and we're still going to make the airport. But it's going to be a huge rush." It's like, what can you do about the problem? Well, you can like do the shit you normally do, pack your own things, and okay, that sure as hell doesn't pack their things for them. It doesn't make things easier on their end. But what you can also do is text them and say, "Hey, can I do something for you? Can I help you pack? Like, can I put some of your shit in a suitcase that I kind of both know you're going to take?" And they might be like, "Yes, can you please just dump?" So I've actually put everything out already on the bed. Can you please dump that into a suitcase and get my wallet, passport, blah, blah, blah. You dump that stuff in, you've just saved a ton of time because you have the time to spare. And then when they come in, you may be just a little bit back, right? Instead of being like, okay, now I need another 20 minutes to pack, they may only need another 5 minutes to pack. Just the same way, when you get hurt anywhere, where you can't train a body part hard, is training it, Tony, to answer your direct question, is training with other muscles going to bring that body part up at the time? Probably not. But you can get so far ahead on the other body parts that now you have this awesome problem of having a ton of advanced body parts and one lagging one. Now that's easy to bring up, as opposed to having a perennial problem of everything's kind of uneven keel and you kind of have to prioritize normally. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if it does. If you have any follow-up questions, let me know about it. Tao Tao Liu, next question asker, asks, I think he wrote somewhere that the lats don't respond to overloading. What is the best way to train the lats, both for strength and work capacity? I'm not sure if we're on the same page with terminology. Lats don't respond to overloading. I'm not sure what that means. Maybe high weights or high reps, I don't know. Tao, if you can rephrase that question, I would be super appreciative. What is the best way to train lats for both strength and work capacity? The standard way. We have a whole guide on that. Renaissance Periodization blog. Hypertrophy training guide, central hub. Type that into Google. It'll come up. And tons of details. But it's really a conventional body part you train like most other things, I think. Let's see what else we have. We're moving right along. Nadia Yuris asks, "Hi, Mike. My gut appears to dislike dairy products. Okay. I'm still taking casein and whey because they don't kill my gut, just a tiny reaction. Ugh. Let's see. Sorry, let me get back centered here. I'm trying to get comfortable. Not easy currently. They don't kill my gut, just a tiny reaction. Just wondering, does the fact that I'm getting a wee bit of a reaction mean that I'm not processing them properly and getting what I'm supposed to and pretty much wasting away the product? Nante, if you can come back and tell me exactly what kind of reaction you're having, I would be more helpful. So I'm myself lactose intolerant, which means that I tend to fart away most of the milk I consume. But that probably just means I'm not digesting the lactose, which means I'm missing out on the carbohydrate. It probably means I'm still absorbing most, if not all, of the protein. But if you have something more like a milk allergy, that could be a little bit different. Let me know what you mean by that. My first guess is if you're really not making you feel great, there's so many alternative products. You can have egg-based protein products. Egg protein is great to replace whey and casein, potentially, if you need to. So I would actually just try different brands, more pure brands, whey isolate or whey hydrolysate, and more isolated forms of casein. They're a little bit pricier, but you could find that once they've taken out a lot of the lactose and extra carbohydrates or whatever it is that's making you not do so well with it, then you may find that you tolerate it just fine. So I would actually give that a shot first, and then if it's still not feeling that great, you shouldn't feel terrible after eating food. I would say just switch to egg protein. It's super awesome, and it'll fit almost most of your needs. If you're trying to win the Mr. Olympia, maybe we'll have you take whey again. But until then, or the Miss Olympia, I think you'd be okay doing what you currently are. And switching to egg is just fine. All right, Alan Durgin says a lot. So let me see if I can read all of this. Oh boy. Laptop transition. I'm doing a balancing act here. Okay. Please forgive the long setup to this question, but I want to make sure I understand the principles I have been learning from your truly awesome videos and not repeat past mistakes. Thanks so much, Alan. We'll find out if you are in fact getting on the principles. This past spring, I completed a 10-week cut using the RP diet templates according to my BAA scale. I dropped from 197 pounds to 177 pounds, but my scale also showed that I dropped from 17.6 to 12.3% body fat. Thus, a significant amount of my weight loss was from muscle. Okay. If my scale can be trusted. It can't, but we'll get to that. In parentheses says, I understand that this is a big if, though I experienced a similar loss of muscle in a previous cut during which I tracked my body composition through hydrostatic body fat testing. That's better. Indeed, I felt a noticeable reduction in strength in both cases, then you almost certainly lost muscle. Okay. During one of the webinars, Nick said that you shouldn't really lose any muscle during a cut if you're following the recommendation of losing no more than 1% of your body weight per week. Granted, I was consistently losing about 2 pounds a week. That's too fast. Which is a tick above the recommendation. Yep. But I'm wondering if my possible muscle loss could be attributed to my training volume. Okay, we'll see. Just to point this out while we're on the subject, so it's one of those things like if you go to a medical doctor, they're a lot of times trained to have multiple diagnoses in mind, but they're usually start out with the most obvious stuff first and save the House, Dr. House, whatever, pill addict guy that is a brilliant doctor. I fucking hate that show, but that's neither here nor there. They save the quirky house diagnoses for later. So if you go to your doctor and you're like, okay, I'm like not feeling so great. I've been drinking a lot of pure plutonium in water, but I also, have been eating like a lot of cheese. What do you think it is? And they might be like, why don't you stop drinking plutonium water? We'll see how it goes. Right? So the kind of more obvious stuff gets hit first. So when you tell me that you're losing about 2 pounds a week, I know a lot of people that take anabolic drugs that can't maintain the strength of 2 pounds a week of loss. So that's fast. That's fast. My first recommendation is whatever I'm going to say after this, I would say next cut, try a pound a week. I know it sounds crazy slow, but you may get no strength loss at all. And then after that, if you get no strength loss on a pound a week, try a pound and a half, and you may get minimal or no strength loss, and then that'll be an awesome middle ground. Give that a shot. All right. So going back, so that being as it is, obvious stuff first, it may be a bit too fast. That's the first thing that stands out to me. I'm wondering if my possible muscle loss could be attributed to my training volume during the 10-week cut. I did CrossFit twice a week and weightlifting twice a week. My CrossFit workouts generally consisted of roughly 15 minutes or so of strength training, typical low reps, 4 to 5 sets of squats, deadlifts, jerks, followed by typical Metcon. My weightlifting involved less than 50 reps per session. Thus, I always ate light on training days. Having watched some of the videos on RP Plus, I'm thinking that my muscle loss could be attributed to low training volume. Yes, it absolutely could be. What would be the correct inference to make? If so, would following the 5-day male physique template be better suited than my current CrossFit weightlifting training for ideal body comp changes? FYI, I just started the 5-day MPT with aesthetics as my main goal, and it rocks. Cool. I would say you could just start up with 4-day male physique template would be a huge improvement on what you were doing in the past. But 5-day, if you're recovering properly, and a lot of that means you shouldn't be losing weight too fast, I think it's totally cool as well. So I think you're in the clear for both. Or was my relatively fast weight loss more likely a culprit? I would say that it's a combination of factors, and you probably don't want to. You probably want to adjust both. Remember, so we have like kind of like a universe of possibilities that you're doing, and we can pick out little fractions of what you're doing and be like, that's a little wrong, that's a little wrong, that's a little wrong. And the question of which one to improve is answered by all of them if you want to get better, right? So if you like have an outfit on and it has really shitty shoes and a shitty t-shirt but really nice jeans, and you say, what do you think, shoes go or t-shirt goes? Somebody could be like, why don't you wear both different t-shirt and different shoes? And you're like, fuck, I didn't think of that. Only if you only have one or the other around, right? So what I would say is do both. Slow down the rate of weight loss a little bit, at least a pound and a half per week, maybe even a pound. Try more training volume for a day MPT, or 5 days, great. Probably kill one bird with 2 stones. But I usually say 2 birds with 1 stone. If this is a big-ass bird, and the first stone, he's like, he's just like mildly inconvenienced by it. But the second stone hits that boy up, and that's it. So, yeah, that's my answer. I hope that's a good answer. But I think both are likely candidates, and there's an attractive effect there, right? So, for example, if I told you just to slow down the weight loss, the amount of training volume that you're doing, so I actually just wrote this into the volume concepts book. On a hypocaloric diet, your maintenance volume goes up. How much training do you need to maintain muscle if you're not losing weight? Not much. If you're losing weight, there's a huge catabolic muscle breakdown stimulus all the time. So the amount of anabolic training stimulus you have to do on the other side to balance it out is higher. So your maintenance volume, the amount of volume you need to maintain your current gains, goes up. And that goes up in relation to the magnitude of the deficit. So if you're running a high deficit, which 2 pounds a week weight loss is a high deficit, your maintenance volume could be here, but your current CrossFit volume and weightlifting volume could be under that. It clearly is. So how do we fix that problem? Well, we reduce the maintenance volume, and then your current training will be okay. We reduce the maintenance volume by reducing the burden of calorie deficit. Or we can, so we have this maintenance volume, we can do male physique template 5 day a week, and then the volume's up here, and then it's in excess of maintenance volume, then you're good. Then you don't lose muscle again, right? So we can say we can either reduce the maintenance volume, or we can attend to the maintenance volume by raising our volume, or we can probably just do both. If you want to do just one or the other, that's cool. I'd do both. Like Nick said, you shouldn't have to lose muscle on a cut in most situations, and I think yours is a crystal clear example of one where you absolutely don't have to, as long as you make those 2 changes. Cool. Cool. All right. Let's see what we have more of. My God, you guys got all kinds of questions today. Jesus, it's as if you're paying for this. All right. Let's scroll on down. All right. Alessandro Zucchi asks, Dear Dr. Mike, first and foremost, like many others, I would like to thank you for all the intellectual contents that you made available to us during the years by which I was able to discover RP and move forward as an athlete. You have my gratitude and admiration. Likewise, Alessandro, thank you so much. Trying our best. I'm constantly following you on Facebook and Instagram, and I hardly need to ask you for anything since your explanations are always very clear. Thank you. But in some of your most recent videos, posts, I found myself in need of clarifications. I thought I would take this opportunity to ask you an RP Plus. Shit, that's a matter of fact why we made RP Plus. Number one, in your most recent podcast with Steve Hall, you discussed the proper way to program metabolite training and stated that you wouldn't recommend a phase of only metabolite for a problem of fatigue management, and instead you would reserve the kind of training at the end of a single workout and only for a few muscle groups at a time. Since male physique templates, we are instructed to train almost half of the time this way in a distinct phase. I would like some clarification on the matter. Would you recommend doing metabolite training for a single muscle at the end of a workout, or reserve it for a specific mesocycle only? I see. Would you recommend doing metabolite training for a single muscle at the end of a workout, like I see you do quite often on Instagram? Or is there, so first of all, the shit you see me do on Instagram is for me. I'm not coaching you when I'm doing shit on Instagram. And there's a couple of things that are really important to say about shit I do on Instagram. I'm all fucked up. Like, my pecs basically are like permanently injured. My triceps are permanently injured. It fucks up almost all of my training. Jiu-jitsu beats me literally almost to death. And the kind of shit I end up doing is shit I would rather not be doing, but have to continue to grow, even though I'm super fucked up. So when I do shit on Instagram, just remember, like, oh, that's cool. The technique, probably good, unless I say don't do it like this. Inspiration, sweet. Look how jacked Dr. Mike is, cool. I should do exactly that and extrapolate a lot of shit behind it. Don't do that shit, because there is every single time a logical reason and a training evidence-based reason why I do things. But remember, the individual differences side of the equation is massive, potentially, especially for somebody like myself who continues to engage in getting their ass beat in jiu-jitsu all the time. That changes a lot of stuff. So, to answer your question, from a principles-based perspective, I got some recommendations for metabolite training. Number one, don't do it all the time. So it should probably be relegated to a phase here and there. Does that mean that you have a phase where you do metabolite training for every single muscle group during that phase at the end of workouts? Maybe. That's how we design the male physique templates. But remember, they're templates. So they have a level of generality and kind of an absence of specificity in them that is... Whoops, sorry, got to move around a little bit. Ugh. They have a level of generality. Oh, yeah, t-shirt. Awesome. That does not allow for super optimality because it is a template. Maybe people say, well, but the template says, well, yeah, it's a template, right? It automatically is not the same thing as customized, super awesome training because it can't be that. So another way to do things that we didn't do them on the template is have a general massing phase where maybe half of your body you do metabolites and half you do conventional high volume training. And then another mass phase later, the other half you do metabolites, or just one or two muscles at a time. So anything goes. So the two really important principles by which to govern your selection of metabolite phase design or metabolite training design is, one, don't do it like every mesocycle over and over and over. You may be able to get away with doing it even every other, but just don't do it like sequentially all the time, because you quickly find out that it's a waste of your time. We're here to tell you in advance that it's a waste of your time. And two, to make sure your total fatigue levels aren't excessive from trying to do too much metabolite training all at once. So if you've got like 2 exercises at the end of each day that are metabolite style training and you're handling them just fine, you're accumulating fatigue just fine, and nothing's excessive, you're not super injured or anything like that, and you're able to incrementally ramp up volumes and intensities, doing that, great. I can't do that. I have to just have 1 exercise at the end, maybe. But if you can, that's totally cool. And I know people that can do damn near the whole workout in metabolite style and be okay for a whole month. But if you can only tolerate 1 metabolite exercise at the end of every workout, and if you only need half your workouts per week to have that, otherwise you get super toasted, that's totally cool. So remember, don't overuse metabolites, especially in sequence. So after using them for about a mesocycle, I take at least a meso off. And 2, stay within your MRV. If you're doing that, there's a huge diversity of ways that you could train with metabolites. And I have nothing to say about which one's better or worse. I would just be making shit up. So hopefully that answered your question. Number 2, in one of your recent posts on Facebook, you know I have ghostwriters that post on Facebook for me, right? That's not really me. I'm kidding. That's a joke. All right. So in one of your recent posts on Facebook, you stated that during a mass, your MRV goes up. So you can train harder than ever make gains. But at the same time, your MEV goes down. Indeed. Not very highly appreciated. For this reason, you suggested extending your mesocycle from a 5-to-1 accumulation paradigm to a 7-to-1. As an example, when massing, do you believe this is optimal way to extend a training program based on the current male physique template, 4-to-1 accumulation deload, reps in reserve, etc., to achieve a longer progression? Thank you very much for your attention. Alessandro, I have a great answer for you. As a matter of fact, holy shit, serendipity. Let me find the part of my super rough draft for the graphs. Now don't worry, these won't be in pen and paper or pencil and paper when they actually get published. They'll be in super graphic designer artsy shit. Let's see if this looks like anything to you. Figure number 20. We got a figure at the very bottom. I think the computer flips this shit around for you guys. But anyway, you'll be able to understand what I'm talking about. So here's a sweet chart. The bottom line here is your minimum effective volume. The top line here is your maximum recoverable volume. Each one of these little points is a volume amount, right? It can be looked at as a volume and load amount per microcycle. So each one of these boxes is a microcycle. So this would be 4 microcycles of a loading paradigm. This is a hypocaloric diet condition, this right here. On a hypocaloric diet, notice your MRV is not very high and your MEV is pretty high. So you can't go either super low or super high. So your loading paradigm needs to be relatively constrained, which means that if you have 4 microcycles of increase, then the increases need to be small. This is an example of adding 1 set per week per body part versus 2 or something like that, or just 2.5 pounds, or 2.5 or 1.25K on the bar versus 2.5K on the bar. So every microcycle. So a slower progression. Now, isocaloric diet, that's just our reference frame. We have, decently low MEV, decently high MRV, plenty of space between them to go from one to the other. And we have a normal paradigm. Now, the mistake, would be, of course, this is up here. Sorry, quick, different graph. This is the mistake graph. You notice it has an X next to it. It's a mistake. Is to start too high on your massing phase and end up too low. Because remember, on your massing phase, your MRV is up and your MEV is down. So there are actually 2 potential theoretical solutions to this problem. One I mentioned in the Facebook post is all the way over here. This is when you extend the length of your mesocycle. Now notice we have 6 boxes, 6 microcycles instead of 4. And now we're able to start from the bottom, and in the same increments as usual, let's say we go up by a set per week, we end up all the way at MRV at the end, deload, repeat. Sweet. So that's the extension method. The other method is not to extend the microcycle at all, or the mesocycle length at all on a mass. It is to simply take bigger jumps. That makes sense? So it's still 4 weeks, but we're able to add a shitload of volume every single time because we're so better able to recover. We have so much room in which to recover because our distance from MEV to MRV, our maximum adaptive volume, is super high. Make sense? So, to answer your question, if we can take the current male physique template, I don't know how good your Excel skills are, but getting that shit to go and add multiple microcycles, if you can get the formulas to transfer, hey, shit, be my guest. The document is yours to do whatever the hell you want with. I can't guarantee it's going to work. I don't even know if the auto-regulation is going to scale. So you can try to take the male physique template and put it out 2 or 3 weeks. Another option, and this is the really cool thing about the male physique templates, in an auto-regulated setting, the question is how much volume do you add per week? And the answer is, how are you progressing? How are you feeling? If you are a mass phase, if you added volume, if you gave the same kinds of ratings that you usually do on a cut, yeah, you'd have to mass for longer because you're only going up by little tiny fractions. But the reality is, if you rate accurately, when you're on a mass, you may be making bigger jumps, and then you'll be in the condition number 1 for massing. You'll be in this guy right here where you're making bigger jumps. So if you want to do this, you'll have to modify your male physique template. I don't recommend it unless you get it to work. Sweet. If you do, that's great. Otherwise, you go here. So if you write your own programs, feel free to take it out. Make it longer, right? The mesocycle. Otherwise, you can stick to shorter mesocycles, just bigger progressions. So an example of that is going up 2 sets on everything every week instead of up 1 set. Oh, damn. Biceps looking jacked in this lighting. I'm just going to start posing for you guys. Forget knowledge. You're here for inspiration. Shit. I won't even wear clothes. Don't tell Nick Shaw I said that. All right. So hopefully Alessandro answers your questions. Great questions, by the way. Yeah. Just a real kind of aside. Related to your question, a lot of people say, your MRV goes up on massing, and thus you should train more on a mass than you do on a cut. At the top end, yes, you will be. But what else is missed is that your minimum effective volume very likely is less on a mass. So what that means is not only can you benefit from more training, but you can benefit from less too. So what that really means is you can make bigger jumps while massing, right? Same mesocycle length, bigger jumps. Or you can extend your mesocycles and get longer progressions, which means just more gains the entire time. But on average, does the train volume of your mass exceed that of your cut? Maybe not, unless you need to take your cut all the way to maintenance volumes. And if you're super advanced, there may be some differences there. But outside of that, the averages probably should be very similar. You just won't be able to have super exotic times during cutting in either direction. You won't be able to come in and just do 10 sets and grow. You won't be able to survive 20 sets and grow. But on a mass, you may be able to start at 8 and survive 22 at the end of it. Give that some thought. Super cool idea. Will be explained in preposterous depth in the volume concept book. All right. Tony Drotnell says, thanks for the answer to my previous question. This was luckily a hypothetical question. It's good, Tony. You keep training hard enough, it won't be hypothetical after a while. Injuries is part of the game. With such a chest injury, would going slightly hypercaloric reduce atrophy? Yeah, it would. And that's a really good idea. And you should be going slightly hypercaloric because you should be massing everything else. If you don't train everything else super hard, going slightly hypercaloric is just going to make you fatter, which sucks. You don't want to have to deal with that problem, as well as regaining muscle mass when you come back. Yeah. Oh shit, there you go. You said this would fit perfectly with training upper body much harder as well. Yeah, totally. So a slight surplus would be good in that condition. You're going to get some fattier boobs at that point for a little while as your muscles shrink and your fat stores at the very least don't fall and probably add a little bit. It's going to make you feel quite sad. But when you come back, you're going to fill that out no problem, and everything's going to be hunky-dory. So, yahoo. All right. Next question. Let's pull this bad boy up. Felipe Machado, our good friend Felipe, says, there we go. Dr. Mike, I understand the theory of dieting, but I was having some trouble with the actual application of it. I watched a webinar where you gave some tips on how to deal with dieting during the holidays, but I was still wondering How do you count calories and macros not only during holidays but on a daily basis? To be able to diet, I had to make an auto template to calculate macros, calories, and everything else. By the way, I'd like to show it to you sometime. It's pretty cool and can be used by anyone. Thank you. That sounds cool. Do you use any kind of auto template or app to do it? How do you approach it on a regular basis? Thank you very much, Doctor. Yeah, Felipe. So, you know, MyFitnessPal is available on the internet. I think it's free unless it's a premium version, which I hear is pretty sweet, but that's cheap too. MyFitnessPal tracks everything. Tells you if you hit your calorie goals, macro goals, you put in all the foods. Is there utility in that? Yes. Some people love it. But just making sure you're hitting the rough estimates is pretty sweet too. For example, people get to tracking their intake really precisely. And they'll say, okay, I'm exactly 2,055.6 calories today. Sweet. But how many people track their output exactly? Do you ever stop in a grocery store and just freeze and wait for 15 minutes because you're only allotted 90 steps every 15 minutes and you got to 90 and you need the next 15-minute interval? Otherwise, you'll go over your expected daily calories? No. So there's an inherent, like, kind of stochastic nature to how much you're going to be involved in physical activity, what kind of supplements you're taking. So, for example, you keep track of your coffee intake, caffeine. That raises your resting metabolic rate. Maybe you don't keep super track of it, so sometimes it's a little higher, sometimes lower. You don't worry about that. I would generally, unless you're like getting ready for a contest, take a very similar approach to food. Just do a good job. Count the shit straightforward. If you're doing a meal plan, eat with if you're doing the RP diet templates or something, just eat the meal plan says. Don't get fancy. If you're doing macros where you fit everything into daily macros, what I do is, this is how I track. I don't even use MyFitnessPal. I just type in my macros literally into my phone, like in a notepad, and I just manually count them and usually hit what I have to hit. And then at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, looks like I have to hit the rest of this to get it in, and that's what I do. The way I estimate macros is, if nutrition labels are available, I use them every time. If I'm at a restaurant, I try to see if it's on the internet. It's almost always on the internet. And if it's neither, then I just try to guesstimate. The thing is, when people say, well, what about when you're guesstimating and you're on a cut and you're not progressing? Then stop guesstimating, stop going out, start eating things with nutritional labels on them only, or mostly, and or create a bigger deficit so you don't have to worry about precision because your deficit takes care of that. So whatever method you choose to go, cutting should be pretty straightforward if you create a big enough deficit and you hit it on average. Even if you miss it sometimes and go over, or miss it sometimes and go under, as long as you're not like willfully, radically over or under predicting calories in a systematic way, you should be good to go. So feel free to use MyFitnessPal. Feel free to track your own macros, and feel free to get as technical or non-technical as you like. But if you're not losing weight, the answer is eat less food. And there's no way to get around that, or do more activity, or a combination of both. So hopefully that answers your question. Nadia Udis says, thank you. Yep, it's mostly gas. Lactose intolerance is my first hypothesis. I can live with it. It would be great if it's not there. I've been thinking about buying grind supplements, but I don't live in the U.S. Stay tuned. We may start shipping abroad within the next several months. Don't quote me on that. We'll consider my options. Thanks. Great answer. How really helpful. Nadia, you're absolutely welcome. And there's tons of supplements. Just try to go for like the isolate ones. I think your first experiment is this. Invest some money, buy some, it's not really much of an investment, utilize some money to buy Whey Hydro, hydrolysis. Optimum Nutrition does ship internationally, and they do have it everywhere, and they make a great Whey Hydro product. If that doesn't feel any better, then your issue is not lactose or anything else. Then it's just the whey itself, and then I'd probably just switch to egg. If that does help, same thing with casein. Hydro casein from the same company. It's preposterously expensive, but you'll feel great. It's like race car fuel. Then you can consider yourself a race car and tell people that you are, in fact, an exotic machine built by aliens to defend the Earth from other bad aliens, that your only weakness is lactose. That's what I tell people about me. It works every time. Alan says, thanks, Dr. Mike. Your answer, per usual, was clear, insightful, and filled with cowardice. Jesus Christ, Alan, that's mean. I shall change both my shitty shirt and shitty shoes and kill that bird with 2 stones. Some birds, too damn big. We need 2 stones. All right. Aha! Tao Tao Liu has come back. Okay, reworded because I think I misremembered what I read. On link, hypertrophy training tips. You the metabolite training doesn't do much for the back, so I'm about to do the entire metabolite meso of FPT. Do I train the lats the same way as everything else, or should I do something different? Lats are relatively weak compared to where I want them to be, so I'm probably excessively concerned. No such thing as excessive concern there. I think your concerns are warranted if you want bigger lats. Train them how the male physique template prescribes. Totally, and it'll work just fine. Notice we just don't do a whole as many supersets and stuff like that for the lats. I think they still have some utility, maybe just not as much. So by design, we haven't really included a ton, as many supersets as we could have, and things like that for the back. Give it a shot and see what you think. Potentially, if you don't get a lot of lat growth and you are not the kind of person that gets a lot of metabolite training for lats, just go harder and heavier or heavier more often. And when you have a metabolite phase for lats, just take all the weights and reduce them, or increase the weights and reduce the rest times, and don't do the supersets, see how that feels. But I would just go through it first at once and see if your lats get bigger or if your performance goes up. And if it doesn't, maybe we can look into making it heavy. All right. Felipe Machado asks, during hypertrophy phases, repetitions in reserve start higher and drop as the micros go. I understand the overloading reasons and the fatigue reasons and all of it. However, there's an interesting other reason that I think you've mentioned, which was about leaving room to increase intensity. Is that correct? That is correct. So if we go to failure up front, we won't be able to increase much volume or intensity because the level of fatigue is going to be super crazy, and it won't let us basically use more weight or use more volume next time because we've kind of shit the bed already. Totally. How do you leave room to increase intensity during strength phases? Same idea. You start further away from failure than you could. And if your idea of a microcycle 1 is to go and give it your all, that's a shitty idea, because how the hell are you going to give it more than your all in the next one? It doesn't make any damn sense. So the idea with training is that every mesocycle you give it your good effort. Next microcycle, when number 2, you give it a better effort, superlative effort, deload, repeat, something like that. By looking at the templates, it seems like you would do it by dropping the reps if necessary. Yeah, you could. Remember, the reps in our scheme of training should be an auto-regulatory feature. We're not trying to hit any reps. We're trying to let the repetitions from reserve guide us to the kind of reps that would be best. And we let the sets adjust the volume so that we don't worry about not doing enough reps and losing volume, because the increase in sets will make up for it if you're due for an increase in sets. So potentially, if you don't have 3 reps, but you have 2 reps, just do 2 reps and then do more sets of 2 reps versus going to 3 reps and shitting the bed. So another question said, would it be a bad idea to start with 3 repetitions in reserve? Thank you very much, Dr. Mike. Thank you, Felipe. Felipe, I hope you were listening, and if you weren't, you can always rewind later when this thing is published to the answer I gave on repetitions reserve earlier. So your question is, would it be a bad idea to start with 3 repetitions in reserve? At face value, no. You may be, in fact, super responsive to that kind of training, right? So I can't really tell you that. With 3 repetitions in reserve, and for your planned increases and planned mesocycle length, at the end of that, you find yourself sort of like, totally messed up, and you can't even overload your last microcycle because you're already too messed up. You bit off more than you can chew. Next time, start at 4. But if you start at 3 and all your progressions go super well and you hit PRs and everything's great and you don't accumulate too much fatigue too early, 3 it is, right? Yeah. Some people start at 2 and go to 0. Some people start at 4 and go to -1 or something, right? Like beyond failure. And they seem to think that works well for them, especially in safe exercises, like lat pull downs and stuff. And some people start with, just a regular 4 and go to 1. So everything between. Some people start with, 4 reps away from failure and don't go any closer than 2 until the last microcycle. Last microcycle, something we discussed earlier. So can you start with 3 RIR? Yes, only if you think that leaves you with enough room at the tail end to still overload. And remember, that's a huge underpinning of why RER works, and that's one of the things you said. Like, we're leaving room for progress. But think about it this way. Overload, so here's our whole possible training volume and training intensity. And overload is a threshold. Like if we're below here, anything below here, like below my eye level, and not sufficiently overloading. Everything from here to MRV, or to maximum recoverable intensity, seen another way, is overloading. So we have this band of overload, right? And we can stretch it out to cover the entire mesocycle, right? So you have micro 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So the goal is, so we get this band, right? The goal is to start at the bottom of this band and go boop, 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 all and end at the top. If we start here, and then we get in the middle of it, we've pissed away all this training because it's non-stimulative. If we start here and we go like this, then we have exited overload. We're not going to be able to recover. We're above MRV, and then we're just going to drop right off the face of the earth, and it's going to be a shitty mesocycle. So that's one of these super awesome principle-driven constraints of training, is that we know we have this bandwidth of overload. And our goal in most mesocycles for conventional purposes is really simple. Start at the bottom, end at the top, have a logical progression all the way through. Now you can progress like this. Okay, that's really cool. You can progress like that. You can progress like that, like this, right? That is super small details. You got to stay in that band, and you got to go from lower to higher. That's it. If anything's below the band, you'll find out. If anything's above the band, you'll find out. How do you find out if it's below the band? A lot of intuition. If you have to test this, we have recommendations, the volume concepts book coming up, how to test this. It's a bit of a laborious process. But if you've been training long enough, like how do you know you're under your minimum effective volume? When you go in and you train just a tiny bit, and people are like, how was that? Fucking pump? Did you get a good bump? You sore or anything? And you're like, I don't feel a fucking thing. I can do that workout 3 times over and I wouldn't feel anything. You're not within your MEV, if that's the case, okay? On the other hand, how do you know if you're over your MRV? Well, that shit is plain and simple. You're simply not able to repeat performances, right? If you squatted, 150K for 4x10 last week, and this week you squatted for 5, 3, 1, ironic choice of numbers, right? To a max, clearly you have not recovered. Clearly you've exited your MRV, and you're just wasting your own time at that point. Probably worse than wasting, but regressing. So Felipe asks a quick follow-up question. Is that the same principle for strength phases? Absolutely. Yeah, you've got to give room for progression. Absolutely. Kind of a little bit of a difference between strength and hypertrophy. There's still that overload band, right? But for strength, it's more intensity-based. So we keep set numbers relatively the same. Relatively. That means they might go up or down a little bit. But we increase load, right? So if you start with 150 kilos for 5s, I want to end at 5s or so, but with 160, how many jumps can I make? How long is it going to take? Well, 160 might be here. You may be able to actually go to 170 and still be within there. Or 160 might be up here for you, and you need to stick to 155 and go slowly from one to the other because it's too egregious of an increase, and you wouldn't survive it. So absolutely, that band, the overload band, all of your productive training that's not recovery-based, like deloads and stuff, should be within that overload band. General rule there, stay within the band. Rule number 1. Rule number 2, on average, go up. Band. Longer than that, you're not exiting either side. And that, folks, I believe brings us to the end of our webinar. Yeah. Tao Tao Liu says, thank you for all the great information. You sound like shit today. Please never make another one of these webinars again. Jesus, Tao Tao, that's just not nice. That's a joke. They didn't really say that. Very nice things were said. Folks, every time I do one of these webinars, I feel like, we're all bringing the earth together. And peace will be at hand soon. I'm totally kidding, but on a hilarious note, and to end it, I remember, what was his name? Sacha Baron Cohen, Ali G, did an interview with a guy. Obviously the guy didn't know it was a joke. And this guy was a house music producer. And he was the whole, everything is about music and connections and life. And I remember Ali G was as Bruno, the super gay clubber boy. And he was so do you think that if we had house music in the 30s, World War II would have happened. And the guy, no joke, he's like a club promoter. He's like, absolutely not. Just like, folks, so remember, you make a time machine, simple. House music, take a bunch of it with you, go back in the 30s, you can prevent World War II. Or you can not be clinically insane and make sense of the world. And with that, I leave you. Till next time. See you guys later.